Welcome to Your Rights, Your Voice. Family Law Clarity with Ellie Sweeney.
Hey there, welcome back to Your Rights, Your Voice, Family Law Clarity with Ellie Sweeney. Ellie is a respected family law attorney serving clients in Los Angeles and Ventura counties. She brings clarity and confidence to the legal process, especially when it comes to complex and emotional issues like custody and child support. My name is Kevin Rosenquist, and today we're unpacking how child support is calculated in California. Whether you're the parent requesting the support or the one expected to pay, understanding these numbers and how they're determined can help you prepare, negotiate, and avoid surprises in court. Ellie, welcome back. Good to see you.
Thank you, Kevin. Good to be here.
So some people I think are confused as to how child support works in general. So let's go over a few different things if you don't mind. What is child support supposed to cover in California?
Okay, so child support is really supposed to cover the basic needs of the child or children depending on a case. So what that means is it includes food, it includes housing, transportation to and from school, hygiene, clothing, everyday expenses, things like maybe birthday gifts or school activities that are part of the regular school curriculum. So perhaps it's easier to say what it doesn't include, which we can touch on later, but something like private school tuition, for example, is not something that would typically be included. So it's really just your regular day-to-day expenses that a parent should expect are going to be necessary to raise a child.
That's a good segue. Let's do it now. What other things are not covered that maybe people think are?
Okay, so like I said, something like private school tuition, the court typically does not have authority to order. But like I said in our prior time we talked, there's always that it depends in family law. There is a possibility they could, but in just some extreme circumstances. Then it does not include things like vacations. If a child is going to be traveling with a different parent, typically they would pay for that. It doesn't include camps. It doesn't include extracurricular activities. So those are certain things that would typically be outside of child support, but again, can be negotiated or depending on circumstances, some could be ordered.
How is it calculated? Are there certain factors? Is it a formula, or is it a little more case by case?
Child support is actually calculated by there's a very straight formula, and over the years it's become so complex that we use special programs to calculate it. Up to recently, it was called the semester, but LA County stopped using that in April of this year. So now we're using a program called X-Spouse. So what is really looked at is income of both parents, but also custodial timeshare, meaning how much time the child spends with each parent will have impact on the total amount of support. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that they have 50-50 custody. It's completely equal, and they earn exactly the same amount of money. No parent will support each other. It's just going to be no support. But they could have 50-50 custody, but one parent could earn higher salary. They still, in that case, would owe support to the other parent. Also, let's say they do earn the same amount of money, but one parent has 80% custody and the other 20%. The one that has more custody will still receive support. And the reason is they want to see the child having approximately the same lifestyle with both parents. And that's what the courts are trying to do when they're calculating this. There's certain other factors that go into play, such as maybe some daycare, maybe who pays health insurance. So there's a multiple of things that can be added to when calculating formula, but I'm not going to go into extreme details. It's it can get very detailed, but generally those are the factors.
Well, we're not a math show, Ellie, so we don't want to get too deep in the weeds. Did you say the program's called X-Spouse?
Yes, it is.
It's pretty on the nose, huh?
Exactly what it's called. X with the letter X, spouse.
Well, at least you know what it is right away,
Yeah.
Is this formula mandatory, or can parents agree to a different amount outside of court?
um, they can agree outside of court. So let me explain. If they do not have an agreement and they go to court, the court is required to use this guideline calculation, and the court will be required to use a program such as XPouse, and try to input as accurately as possible all the details into that calculation. But parents can agree differently, and they can reach an agreement otherwise. It's important to know that they cannot completely waive child support. It's something you can do with spousal support, but not with child
Mhm.
support, because that would be considered against public policy. But they can say, hey, we feel that the children are equally cared for and they have everything they need in custody of each parent. And because of that, we're just going to agree to set it to zero. They can do that. They can also say, well, we do want our kids to be in private school. And so we're going to agree that the higher earning parent is going to pay private school tuition, all of the health expenses, all extracurriculars, and so forth. So they'll pay all of that, and that would be in lieu of support. Sometimes people can reach agreement like that, and that is okay. The courts will not go against it as long as the courts feel that the children are adequately provided for in both households. That's truly all that matters.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That definitely makes sense. So what about if a parent is unemployed? Or how do they handle that?
Well, that parent could be imputed income if they're unemployed. Sure, we can look at different reasons why the parent is unemployed. And again, so it's going to depend from case to case. Let's say we're dealing with a mom who was a stay-at-home mom and wife for 20 years, and she didn't work for 20 years, and for her to find employment is going to be a little difficult at this
Yeah.
time. But if she's young and she's healthy enough to work and has maybe some education behind her or could take some classes, the courts will find, well, down the road, they could potentially start working. So that maybe looked a little different than somebody who is just unemployed at the time, but perhaps is of good age and health, and maybe they just are choosing not to work. Um, so the courts can impute income to that party. And what they can do is they can say, well, at the minimum, you should be able to get a minimum wage job. So they'll impute minimum wage. But sometimes we'll even go to extent of getting vocational evaluations done, where we say, well, this party has various degrees, or they have extensive knowledge in certain area, and because of that, we believe that they can earn 50,000 a year or 80,000 a year. And if you get an expert vocational evaluator, which we often do, the courts will take that into consideration and could impute income based on that evaluation. Now, there is another thing the courts can do, um, which is a different approach. And that is they can come and say, well, we can use the party's expenses instead of income. Let's say a
Oh,
party comes to court and says, well, I have expenses each month about 6,000 a month, but I don't earn any income. Yet they have no significant debt, or they don't owe money to anyone. So the court can sit there and wonder how and why that's happening, but they're not going to spend that time probably. And they're going to come and say, you know what? We're just going to use your expenses and say, if you can pay 6,000 a month to cover all of your expenses, that means you have somehow to your availability 6,000 a month, and we'll use that as your income. So there are a variety of tools that we can use, even if a party is unemployed or underemployed, or perhaps earning cash only, and so forth.
you hope that parents want what's best for their kids. We've talked about that before. Um, but you could see a situation probably where somebody maybe underreports their income or tries to fudge the numbers or something like that to get out of how much they have to pay. If that's something that someone suspects, I imagine they bring that up in court during the proceedings.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, the burden becomes on the party who is trying to prove that to find ways to prove it. And
Right.
sometimes we can do that by issuing subpoenas for their bank statements and running discovery. And you can see, well, they spent this and that much on travel this year, and or they're donating this much money. Now, certain things like that, let's say if somebody has their own business, such expenses can be deducted, for the purposes of tax filing, but in family court are viewed differently. So we call them perquisites and we add them back to the income and say, well, that wasn't really just a business expense, so we still consider it your income. So there are ways to show that, but again, the burden becomes on the party trying to prove it, and sometimes bringing pictures of fancy cars they have or anything to show the lifestyle that may not be exactly what they're trying to portray is always helpful.
We touched on social media in the last episode. I'll bet that would play in pretty heavily for something like that. Someone's
And it,
foolishly posting vacation pics in Dubai and stuff.
it does often. That is
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. What about expenses that go kind of beyond basic support? Like for example, if an extracurricular activity that the child maybe really enjoys or becomes really, really good at, does that get factored in as well?
Um, that is something that the courts will typically order if it is an agreement of the party for the
Uh,
child to be in certain extracurriculars, then they should share those expenses. This is not something that the courts necessarily get involved in as much, but it is not mandatory. So those things, if the parties, let's say they both want the child to play tennis, and then they'll agree and they'll both pay for it. But certain things are mandated by court. For example, uninsured medical expenses, which can
mm,
include dental. As you can imagine, orthodontics can come up very often if
sure.
child needs braces, and it can be expensive. So those are typically ordered to be shared by parties. Um, Sometimes, if one parent is a much higher earner, you could argue that they should pay a larger percentage. So perhaps we can say that parent will pay 75% of that and the other will pay 25%. But typically, any uninsured medical will be equally split. And then things like extracurriculars and camps and maybe school trips that are not mandatory, the parents simply need to agree. And if they don't agree, the parent who wants the child to go to that still has the option to sign up the child for it if the other party does not object to that, but then they would have to bear the burden of cost themselves.
How often can child support be modified? And does it need some sort of a life change to justify it?
Um, it depends.
Hey,
Um,
there's that answer.
there's no really limit as to how often it can be modified. I mean, maybe you have a child support order and the child is only 2 years old. It the court reserves jurisdiction until the child finishes high school, is 18. So it can be modified. And then typically you would need some change in circumstance if it's post judgment, if this is something you want to modify a year after the judgment was entered or 2 years later. But change in circumstance can be maybe the custodial timeshare changed. Maybe now something happened and one parent has child more often than the other parent. Sometimes it can be a parent got a new job. Sometimes a parent lost a job.
Mhm.
As you can imagine, during COVID, we dealt with these issues a lot.
I'll bet.
And because some people were being furloughed and some people were let go, but maybe there's severance pay, and then you need to take that into consideration. So it is modifiable because at the end of the day, the courts would like to have the order that is proper, that is not a burden to either parent, but that is ensuring adequate care for the child while in custody of either parent.
So now, what happens if a parent refuses to pay the child support that the court determined they should pay? What are the enforcement options? What are the punishments?
What happens? Well, it's not advisable to stop paying support, and I definitely would not advise my client to do that. Um, it's one of those things you cannot discharge child support in bankruptcy. It's an order that doesn't go away. It's going to stay there forever. And if you stop paying it and the other parent goes to child support services to enforce it, every late payment will be hit with 10% annual interest, and it can just keep accumulating over years. So there are several tools that a parent can use. And one of the easiest things is if a parent is employed as a W-2 employee, that is very simple because you can get a wage garnishment and it can be attached to their paycheck, and it'll just going to be deducted immediately directly from their pay. But in situations when a person is self-employed or unemployed, collection becomes obviously very much harder.
Sure.
But child support services have ways of collecting. They can place liens on property. They can freeze bank accounts. And like I said, they will collect, they will keep adding this interest. I think one thing that a lot of people also don't know is that if you end up owing a lot in child support, it actually becomes a federal crime. And if you want to travel internationally, you can be stopped at the border, and people can face serious situation because of it. It's really not advisable. And I always encourage my clients to pay support, but typically I have clients who are on receiving end, and it's the collection that we deal with more.
Yeah. Does it happen a lot?
It doesn't happen. I wouldn't say a lot. I think sometimes it happens that a person falls behind, maybe for
Sure.
a few months. And then we reach out, try to negotiate and say, hey, what's going on? Maybe something happened in their life and it wasn't intentional. But I've also had cases where a person just even leaves states. You can't even find where they are. They don't work. You can't catch anything with Social Security. They own no assets. And those are difficult cases. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't make up money. If it's not there, it's not there.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, tricky situations for sure. Thanks for shedding some light on that, Ellie. And thank you for listening to Your Rights, Your Voice, Family Law Clarity with Ellie Sweeney. If you're dealing with a child support issue and want legal guidance you can trust, visit elliesweeneylaw.com to schedule a free consultation. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Leave us a review. We greatly appreciate it. And we got lots more great stuff coming your way. Ellie, always great chatting with you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.